The wind had teeth in late autumn, and it gnawed at the high lonesome of the Mogollon Rim. It came from the north, carrying the sharp, clean scent of dry juniper and the taste of red dust that plagued the Arizona Territory in 1884. The sky was a vast, bruised purple at the edges, promising a cold night. Below the rimrock, the frontier town of Mesquite Crossing hunkered low, its raw lumber buildings looking like they had been scattered by a careless hand. Ezra Calloway rode his horse. Rook at a walk. The big black gelding needed no guidance. Picking its way up the rocky incline to Juniper Mesa, the town was behind them, a smear of smoke and noise. Up here, there was only the wind and the whispering cheatgrass. Ezra pulled his wool coat tighter. He was a man built of hard angles, his face mapped by sun and wind, his hands scarred from 2 lives. One life had been as a cavalry medic, spent stitching men and horses back together, or failing to. This second life was as a trapper and carpenter, a man who preferred the company of wood grain and the silent snap of a steel trap. Rook stopped, sensing they had arrived. Juniper Mesa Cemetery was not a place of peace. It was a place of necessity, a patch of stubborn ground fenced with sagging wire to keep the coyotes out. The markers were mostly rough-hewn wood, canted at angles by the unforgiving soil. Ezra dismounted, his boots sinking into the red earth. He walked past the markers of men he had known prospectors who coughed their lungs out, a woman taken by childbed fever, 2 brothers who drew on each other over a card game. He stopped at a newer mound, one that had settled over the past year. The cross was simple, the name carved into it with a knife. The strokes hurried but deep. John Greyhawk. From his coat pocket, Ezra pulled 2 silver dollars. They were heavy, cold in his palm. He knelt, the canvas of his trousers scraping the gravel. He looked at the name, and the memory he had ridden all day to confront finally broke cover. It had been chaos, a botched robbery at the land office, the Markham gang, drunk and trigger-happy. Ezra had been in the carpenter's shop, fitting a sash. When the first shots echoed, he had done what the army trained him to do. He grabbed his rifle, found cover, and assessed the threat. He saw Boone Lyle, one of Markham's men, take aim at the sheriff's window. Ezra fired. A clean shot, practiced, necessary. It was meant to save a life, to stop a threat. But gunfire is a liar. It speaks in a language of pure confusion. His shot had struck home. Yes, but in the same volley of sound, another man had fallen on the edge of the street. John Greyhawk, who had been leading a pack mule, had simply dropped. Ezra had not seen it, not until later. The coroner, Mortimer Hale, had declared it a stray bullet, a ricochet, an act of God in a town full of devils. But Ezra knew ballistics. He knew the rifle in his hands, and he knew the nagging, sickening doubt that had burrowed into his gut and stayed there for a year. The angle was wrong, the distance was long, but the possibility remained. His bullet, meant for a killer, might have taken an innocent man. He placed the 2 silver dollars on the hard-packed dirt of the grave. It was not enough. He knew it was not enough. It was a carpenter paying for a broken board, a trapper paying for a damaged pelt. It was a fool's errand, but it was the only currency he had for this kind of debt. Take it back. The voice was low, clear, and cut through the wind like a shard of obsidian. Ezra froze. He had not heard her approach. He rose slowly, turning, keeping his hands away from his belt. She stood 20 feet away, partially shielded by a cluster of skeletal yucca. She was Dine, her features carved with a proud, sharp beauty that mirrored the land itself. Her hair was pulled back in the traditional tzait-yil, a tight bun that spoke of order and discipline. She wore a deep blue velvet blouse and a tiered skirt, clothes that showed a deference to her ways. Not the town's, but it was her eyes that held him. They were dark, bright, and held the same unforgiving chill as creek ice in deep winter. She was Nayeli Greyhawk, John's daughter. She had been watching him. He saw it now. She had watched him ride up, watched him walk, watched him kneel. She had waited. "I do not want your money," she said, her English precise. "It is not?" Ezra started, his voice rough from disuse. "It is respect. For your father. Naomi's gaze flickered to the 2 silver coins shining on the grave. A look of profound, cold disgust crossed her face. She saw the coins not as a tribute, but as a transaction. A price. A pathetic attempt to buy absolution for a life. You think you can pay for the silence, she asked. You think silver can close the earth over him? No, ma'am, He fumbled. What had he thought? He had thought to ease the gnawing in his own soul. He had thought to do something. Anything. She took a step forward, the dry yucca pods rattling at her side. My father's life was not a debt to be settled with saloon change. She looked from the coins to Ezra's face, and her eyes stripped him bare. I'd rather die. The words hung in the air, absolute and final. She would rather be dead than accept this gesture, than participate in this lie that money could mend what a bullet had broken. Ezra felt the blood drain from his face. Her words were a judgment, and they found him guilty not of the shooting, but of this new, uglier sin, the sin of easy penance, as if summoned by the tension. A sound split the air. Not a gunshot, but a sound that tried to claim the same authority. A bell, thin and reedy, clanging from the valley. From the small, unpainted structure that served Mesquite Crossing as a church. Ezra glanced down. He saw a figure in a long black coat standing near the church's entrance. Too far to hear, but positioned to see. Deacon Horace Bly. The man was a shadow. An itinerant preacher who moved from camp to camp. His salary paid by some Eastern society dedicated to civilizing the territories. Bly had a contract with the government to bring souls to heal, and he watched his flock, and those outside it, with a hungry, assessing gaze. Above them, a trio of crows began to circle, their calls like rusty hinges. A bad omen, his grandmother would have said. Ezra looked back at Naomi, but her focus was on the bell, on the distant figure of Bly. A new tension entered her posture, something different from grief. It was fear, but a hard, angry kind of fear. Ezra Calloway suddenly understood. He had come here with $2 silver to close a ledger, but in laying them down, he had opened a different book entirely. Naomi's words, Bly's watchful presence, the crows in the sky had all pointed to something deeper and more rotten than a single stray bullet. This was not about a simple accident. He was standing on the edge of a war he did not understand. A war over a man's memory, over a woman's future. A war of conscience against a twisted law he was only just beginning to see. Naomi turned, not looking at him again. She gathered her skirt and began to walk, not back toward the town, but west, following the dry, rock-strewn bed of dead horsewash. She moved with a fluid, ground-eating stride, a figure of solitary resolve against the massive, indifferent landscape. Ezra watched her go. He felt the weight of the $2 silver he had left behind, now heavier than any burden he had ever carried. He reached up and gripped the brim of his hat, pulling it low. He was a carpenter. He was a medic. He was a man who fixed things. This was broken. Broken in a way he had not imagined. He could not ride away. He could not leave the coins or the woman's words behind. He had come seeking peace for his own soul, but he had found the beginning of a fight. He would not leave Mesquite Crossing, not until he knew the truth of John Greyhawk's death, and why his daughter would rather die than take a white man's silver. Rook huffed, impatient. Ezra put a hand on the horse's neck, his gaze fixed on the wash where Naomi had disappeared. The wind howled, and the red dust rose to meet the falling dusk. Mortimer Hale's undertaking parlor smelled of arsenic, cheap pine, and the final, metallic quiet of the body. Ezra Calloway pushed the door open, the bell above it giving a weak, tinny jingle. The parlor was dark, the front windows painted black halfway up. Hale was in the back, a small man with a perpetually damp brow, planning the edge of a coffin. He looked up, startled, his hand tightening on the tool. Calloway. "We are not open for viewing. I am not here to view," Ezra said, his voice quiet, which made it seem louder in the small room. He walked past the coffins, his boots making no sound on the sawdust-covered floor. "I am here about John Greyhawk." Hale's face went pale, the dampness on his forehead turning to active sweat. "That was a year ago. A tragedy. The town mourned. You handled the body. It was not a question. Ezra stopped opposite the workbench. You prepped him for burial. You saw the wound. It was a gunshot, Mr. Calloway. In a gunfight, these things happen. Hale put the plane down, his hands visibly shaking. He wiped them on his leather apron. I was a cavalry medic for 6 years, Ezra said, his eyes fixed on the undertaker. I have seen what a rifle bullet does. I saw the entry, Hale, but I did not see the exit. The town buried him fast. Deacon Bly said a prayer over him before the sun set. It was a stray. Ezra, a ricochet. You heard the sheriff? A ricochet tumbles. It makes a keyhole, not a clean punch. I need to know about the bullet, the one you pulled from his chest. Hale looked trapped. He glanced toward the street, as if hoping for a customer or a savior. I do not keep such things. It is not proper. I gave it to the sheriff at the time. Sheriff Brody, the man who was gone a week later. Ezra said, the man replaced by Ruiz. It was a .45-70. From a rifle. That is all I know. Ezra leaned in, his voice dropping. My rifle is a .45-70, but my shot was from the carpentry shop. 200 yards, downward angle. It would have passed clean through a man's shoulder or chest and left a hole the size of my fist on the way out. It would not have stopped inside him, not unless it hit the spine, and he did not fall that way. He tapped his own chest. The wound was here, high, level, as if from the street, as if from someone standing close. Hale broke. He let out a small sob, his shoulders slumping. You cannot ask me this, Ezra. You cannot. They will ruin me. Who is they, the men who brought him in? Hale whispered, his eyes wide. It was not the sheriff's men. It was Cade Markham and Boone Lyle. They brought the body in, said they found him on the road, a victim of the crossfire. Markham. The name landed like a stone. Markham and his crew ran the muscle for the Cathedral Butte logging camp. They were mean, protected, and always had coin. They told me, Hale continued, his voice barely audible, that it was a sad thing, but it was best for the town if it was just a stray bullet. They paid for the coffin, a fine coffin, and the bullet Ezra pressed. It was not a rifle slug. Hale hissed, the confession bursting out of him. It was small. From a pistol. I saw it, but they took it. Markham said he would hold it for evidence. They were here, waiting. When I finished, I did what they said. Cathedral Butte, Ezra said. It was all the confirmation he needed. He turned and walked out, leaving Mortimer Hale trembling by his half-finished coffin. The street was bright. The afternoon sun a harsh glare after the gloom of the parlor. Ezra stood for a moment, letting his eyes adjust. He felt a gaze on him. He scanned the street, the usual traffic. A freight wagon. 2 women in bonnets by the general store. Nothing, but the feeling remained. He did not see Nayeli. She was across the street, in the deep shadow of the alley between the assay office and the bathhouse. She had watched Ezra go into Hale's. She watched him come out. His face was a mask of cold granite, but she saw the tension in his shoulders, the way his hands curled and uncurled at his sides. He was not a man at peace. He was a man digging. She did not know if he was digging for the truth or to bury it deeper. A voice, sharp and carrying, cut through her thoughts. Cannot have idle hands, especially not savage ones. The law is the law. Deacon Horace Bly. Nayeli shrank back. Bly was standing by the livery, talking to the foreman from the Cathedral Butte camp. The foreman, a large man with a stained beard, spat a stream of tobacco. She will not come easy. Deacon, the foreman said, she is wild. Like her father. That is why the document is so important, Bly said, his voice smooth and cold. Nayeli saw him tap a piece of paper in his coat pocket. The wardship paper is signed by the magistrate. She is officially an orphan of the territory, and I am her guardian, tasked with her education. You will take her to the school. The mission will handle the rest. And my pay, the mission is generous, as is the railroad. A civilized territory is a profitable one. Bly smiled, a thin, dry expression. Go, take the girl, take her tonight. Nayeli's blood turned to ice. Wardship, school. It was a lie. It was the school they sent the Apache children to, a place they never came back from. This was not education. It was a cage. She looked from Bly to Ezra, who was now walking toward the sheriff's office. She had to warn him. But to warn him was to trust him, and trust was a currency she did not have. Ezra pushed into the sheriff's office. It was clean, smelling of lye soap and gun oil. A woman sat behind the desk, writing in a ledger. She looked up. Sheriff Alma Ruiz was not what the territory expected. She was compact, her hair pulled back in a severe bun, her skin the color of tanned leather, her eyes were dark and missed nothing. Calloway. She said, "Heard you were back. Heard you went to the Mesa." "I went to the Mesa." Ezra agreed. "Let the dead stay dead. We have enough trouble with the living. John Greyhawk's death is trouble for the living, specifically for his daughter." Alma Ruiz put her pen down. "You are a carpenter. Ezra, stick to wood. You start digging into that. You are not digging in dirt. You are digging in railroad ties. The Verde Spur is coming through. The territory wants it. The government wants it. And men like Cade Markham are how they clear the path. Problems get doused quick. Markham and Boone Lyle delivered the body." Ezra said, "That is what I heard. Hale says the bullet was not mine. It was a pistol slug." Alma's face did not change. Hale is a coward who smells like formaldehyde. His word against the paper. The paper says stray bullet. Case closed a year ago. "So you are not going to do anything. I'm going to keep the peace," she said, her voice flat. "That means I stop fistfights. I lock up drunks, and I make sure no one shoots at the survey crews. It does not mean I dig up a grave to satisfy a man's conscience, especially when it threatens the biggest federal contract this territory has ever seen. Go home. Ezra, build a cabinet." Ezra looked at her for a long moment. He saw the calculation in her eyes. She was a woman holding a line that was drawn in shifting sand. She was not corrupt. She was a survivor. He was a good man. Ezra said, "Good men are the first to die out here," she replied. "Close the door on your way out." That night, the mesquite bell was roaring. The smell of stale beer, sweat, and cheap whiskey hit Ezra as he pushed through the batwing doors. He scanned the room. Markham and Boone Lyle were at a corner table, a bottle between them, surrounded by rough-looking men from the logging camp. Ezra walked to the bar. He ordered a water. The bartender, a heavy man named Silas, raised an eyebrow but served him. The noise of the piano and the shouting men was a physical weight. "Look what the wind blew in," a voice drawled. Cade Markham was standing, walking toward the bar. He was a big man, florid-faced, wearing a gaudy vest. If it is not the town's hero medic, come to save some souls. Ezra turned slowly. "Markham." "Heard you were asking questions." Markham sneered. "Poking around old graves? It is unhealthy." "Heard you were at the land office robbery." Ezra countered. His voice even. "I was defending the town." "Just like you," Markham said. A predatory smile on his face. He leaned closer. "And I heard you have been seen talking to that little savage piece, Greyhawk's daughter. You thinking of civilizing her yourself." He laughed, a wet, ugly sound. "I would not bother. She is the mission's property now. Bly's ward, though I'd be happy to take her off his hands for a night, tame her a bit." The room went quiet. Ezra did not move. He felt the blood rush in his ears, the old, cold rage that he had learned to control on a dozen battlefields. He could break this man's jaw in one move. He could have him on the floor before he drew a breath. But he did not. He was a carpenter. He was a medic. He was not a brawler. He needed something more than a broken bone. He looked Markham dead in the eye. His voice was not a shout. It was a promise, and it carried across the silent saloon. "I am coming for your confession, Cade, and I am going to make you give it." Markham's smile faltered. He was used to fists, to guns. He was not used to this cold, sober certainty. He postured, puffing out his chest. "You are a dead man." "Calloway." "Maybe," Ezra said, "but I will get it first." He put a nickel on the bar for the water he had not touched and walked out. The saloon doors swung shut behind him, and the noise erupted once more, louder this time, covering the sudden chill. The alley beside the saloon was dark. He was halfway down it when a figure stepped from the shadows. He went for his sidearm, but the figure spoke. Easy, Carpenter, Alma Ruiz. She did not look at him. She was staring at the wall. That was a fool thing to do. You just painted a target on your back. It had to be said. No, it did not. But it is done. She pushed something hard and cold into his hand. It was a key. The old adobe warehouse? Behind the tannery. It has a solid door and a back way out, if you need shelter. He closed his hand around the key. Why? Sheriff, because, she said, finally turning to him, her eyes catching a sliver of moonlight. I do not like men who talk about women that way. And I do not like murderers, no matter how much the railroad likes them. But I did not give you this. I did not see you. You are on your own. She was gone, melting back into the shadows. Ezra did not go to the warehouse. Not yet. He had one more stop. He went back to Juniper Mesa. The moon was a sliver, the stars a cold, brilliant spray. He did not go to the grave. He settled himself in a cluster of boulders 100 yards up the slope, a spot that gave him a clear view of John Greyhawk's marker. He waited. 4 hours. There was only the wind. Then, near 3 in the morning, he saw it, a figure, small, moving with no light. It slipped through the wire fence and went directly to the grave. The figure knelt, just as he had done. It stayed for a long time, its shoulders shaking. It was not Nayeli. The build was wrong. It was a woman, but older, heavier. The figure fumbled at the base of the marker, seeming to bury something in the loose dirt. Then, as silently as it appeared, it was gone, back toward the town. Ezra waited a full 30 minutes. He moved from the rocks, crossing the ground where the figure had been. He knelt by the grave. The $2 silver he had left were gone. He felt the dirt. It was disturbed, fresh. He dug with his fingers, the earth cold and gritty. His fingers touched cloth. He pulled it out. It was a small, worn bag of soft leather. It smelled of sage and sweetgrass. He opened it. Inside, there was a small amulet, a piece of pearlescent shell carved into a smooth disc. There was a length of hide string, stained in one spot with a smear of bright red paint, the kind used to mark trees for felling at the logging camp. And at the bottom, heavy and dense, was a piece of lead. It was mushroomed on one side, but the base was intact. It was small, a .32 caliber slug. Ezra rolled it in his palm. Not a .45-70, not from his rifle. This was the bullet, the one Hale had seen. This was not a stray shot. This was not an accident. This was murder. And someone, a woman in the night, had just given him the proof. He found her where the land died. The Verde Flats were a white, shimmering scar on the earth, a place where the sun baked the alkaline crust until the air itself wavered. She was a solitary figure in the vast, white emptiness, her dark blue skirt a blot of color against the glare. She was digging, her hands careful, gathering saltbush and desert holly for medicine. Ezra rode Rook at a dead walk, and still she heard him. She was on her feet before he was within 50 yards, a long, sharp digging stick held in her hand, not like a tool, but like a short spear. He stopped, dismounted, and tied Rook to a piece of gnarled greasewood, leaving his rifle in its scabbard. He approached on foot, slow, his hands in sight. He did not want her to run. He did not want her to fight. He just needed her to see. He stopped a good 20 feet from her. The heat was a solid thing, pressing on them both. Nayeli Greyhawk, he said. His voice sounded too loud in the silence. She watched him, her eyes narrowed against the sun. She did not speak. He held up the small leather bag. I found this, at your father's grave. He did not throw it. He did not try to hand it to her. He walked forward 10 measured paces, placed the bag on the white, cracked earth, and then stepped back, resuming his distance. He held his palms out, open and empty. She watched him, not the bag. She was reading him. He was a medic, used to calming spooked horses and wounded men. He stood still, breathing slowly, making himself small, unthreatening. After a full minute, she moved. She walked to the bag, her movements fluid and cautious. She picked it up. He saw her fingers feel the soft leather, recognized the shell amulet. She opened it. She looked at the length of hide, at the smear of red paint. She saw the .32 caliber slug. She did not just look at it. She lifted it to her nose. She closed her eyes and inhaled. Once, her eyes snapped open, and they were full of a new, sharp light. She looked at him. Boone Lyle. She said. It was not a question. Ezra nodded. How do you know the oil? She said, her English clipped. He buys the cheap oil from the freight depot. The green tin. It stinks. My father said you could smell him coming from a mile off. She closed her fisted hand around the slug and the amulet. He buys bad oil. He works at Cathedral Butte. He was with Markham when they brought your father's body to Hale, Ezra said. She nodded, accepting this as a fact she already knew. The silver you left, the $2. It is gone, I know. Who took it? A woman. From the town. I did not see her face. Ezra said, she left proof. Nayeli corrected him. She looked at him, her gaze traveling from his worn boots to his sun-haunted eyes. Why did you come here? Why give this to me because I am a carpenter? I like things to be true, square and plumb. This is not square. He paused, searching for the words. And because your father deserves more than a lie. She held his gaze. She was deciding. He had given her a weapon, and she was deciding if he was, himself, another one. She gestured to the land around them. I am working. I can wait. He went back to Rook, took a canteen, and sat in the thin shadow of the horse, his back against a salt-crusted rock. He did not watch her. He watched the horizon, giving her the respect of his inattention. He sat for 2 hours. The sky in the west began to change. The pale, bleached blue turned a sick, dusty yellow. The wind, which had been a hot breath, stopped. The silence became absolute, heavy, and charged. Nayeli stood up, her eyes on the horizon. We have to go, where it does not matter. It is here. It came not as a wind, but as a wall, a solid mass of red dust and sand, 1,000 feet high, rolling toward them. Ezra was on his feet, untying Rook, who was already sidestepping, his eyes wide. My horse is fast, Ezra said, grabbing the reins. Not fast enough. It will blind you in a minute. We need cover. Now. She pointed. There was no cover, only a shallow ditch, a small rise of rock. Here Ezra yelled over the rising shriek of the wind. He unstrapped the heavy leather and canvas tarp from behind his saddle. It was his ground sheet and shelter. Oiled against the rain, he grabbed his saddlebags. He ran to the shallowest part of the ditch, a small cutout in the earth barely 3 feet deep. Get in! She slid into the hollow as the first, stinging grains of sand hit them. Rook screamed as the wall of grit hit him. Hold this! Ezra threw one edge of the tarp to her. She gripped it. He pulled the heavy canvas over their heads, fighting the wind which was now a living, tearing thing. He used his body as an anchor, jamming the edges of the tarp into the dirt with his boots, piling rocks on it that he could feel but not see. The world went dark, red, and screaming. The sound was a physical weight, a continuous deafening roar. The air was thick, hot, and full of dust that tasted like iron. He had one end of the shelter. She had the other. They were 2 feet apart, in total darkness. He felt her moving. A small click, a spark, and then a tiny, wavering light from a match. She lit a small stub of a candle, cupping it in her hands. In the tiny, flickering light, he saw her face, streaked with red dust. She was calm. Her eyes were on the canvas, watching where it billowed and strained. It will hold, he said, his voice flat in the enclosed space. You are a carpenter, she said. It should. The storm raged for hours. The tiny candle burned down. The darkness returned. They sat in silence. The only sound the high-pitched screaming of the wind and the periodic thump of a rock or branch hitting the canvas. Ezra did not sleep. He sat, his arms on his knees, his back against the dirt wall. He was acutely aware of her breathing, just feet away. He was a medic, and he knew the simple, profound intimacy of shared survival. He had given her the shelter. He had given her the proof. He could do no more. He felt a small, sharp object press into his hand. He startled. "What is this?" he asked the darkness. "A lock," her voice came back. Calm. "From my bag. Put it on the strap. On the inside." He felt what she meant. His tarp had a heavy leather strap and buckle. He was offering her a lock for the door. A door only she could open. I am sleeping outside," he said, his voice thick. "Yes," she said, "but you will be warm." He realized she was handing him a thick wool blanket from her pack. He had given her his shelter. She was giving him her warmth. It was a trade, a beginning. When the wind finally died, it was well past midnight. The silence was as profound as the storm. "It is over," she said. He unfastened the buckles, his fingers stiff. He pushed the canvas back. The world was remade. The moon was high, and it lit a landscape that was smooth, red, and utterly still. The air was cold, scoured clean. Ezra crawled out, his joints aching. He stood and breathed the cold, clean air. He helped Rook, who was caked in dust but unharmed, and refastened his tarp. Nayeli emerged, shaking the dust from her skirt. She looked at him. "You sleep," she said, pointing to the canvas shelter. "I will watch. The night is not over." He did not argue. He was exhausted. He trusted her. He crawled into the shelter, which still held a faint trace of her scent, sage and clean dust. He was asleep in a moment. He awoke to the smell of smoke. He sat up, his hand instinctively going to his side, but he was not in danger. The sun was just breaking, painting the Mongolian rim a brilliant, burning rose. Nayeli was sitting by a small, smokeless fire she had made from dry mesquite roots. A small tin cup of water was heating on a rock. She had not slept. She had watched. She looked at him as he crawled out, stiff. She pushed a different cup toward him, one from her own pack. It was full of a hot, steaming, pale yellow liquid. "What is it?" he asked. "Tiswin," she said, "from the roots I gathered yesterday. It is tea. It will wake you." He took the cup. It was hot. He sipped. It was bitter, but clean, and it warmed him from the inside out. It was a truce, an acceptance. They rode double on Rook for a mile until they found her horse, safe in a small box canyon where she had left it. They rode in silence for a time, back toward the high country, leaving the salt flats behind. They stopped at Willow Notch, a small, spring-fed creek that cut through a canyon of gray rock. As she watered her horse, Ezra took the .32 slug from his pocket. "I have to get into the logging camp," he said. She shook her head. "You will die. Markham's men are everywhere. You are one man. I need to find the pistol that fired this. I need to find the records. You heard Bly. He is coming for you. He will not stop. I know what he is," she said, her voice low and fierce. "Then help me. I am a medic. I am a carpenter. I am not a tracker." He looked at her, his request open and honest. Teach me what to look for." She looked at him for a long time. Then she nodded. She took him to the soft mud by the creek. "This," she said, pointing to a mark. "Coyote. See the pads, the nails. He is not heavy." She moved on. "This is a shod horse, heavy, carrying a man." Ezra knelt, looking. "How do you know the print is deep? Even, he was walking." She pointed to another set. "This one, different." Ezra looked. He saw nothing. "It is just a horseshoe print," she sighed, a small huff of impatience. She knelt beside him, so close he could feel the warmth from her shoulder. "No, look," she pointed. "The iron is old, worn on the outside, and see the clips here and here. 2 clips. I see them. That is a Kansas shoe, old style. No one here uses them. They use the mule shoe, or the open toe. This is a man from the East, a man who does not know this land. This mark is all over the trail to Cathedral Butte." Ezra looked, and now he saw it. A foreign print, in the native soil. He tried to trace the outline with his finger, to feel the difference. Like this, no. Her voice was quiet. She reached out, her fingers, dry and warm, brushed the back of his hand, so lightly it was barely a touch. She guided his hand, moving his index finger to trace the hard, sharp edge of the Kansas shoe print. Here, feel the hard edge. He is heavy. He is careless. The touch was gone as quickly as it came. It was just a motion, a simple act of instruction. But for Ezra, it was a brand. It was the first time in a year a human hand had touched him with purpose and not violence. He stopped breathing, his finger frozen in the mud. He looked at her. She was watching her hand, the one that had touched him, as if it had surprised her. She pulled it back, slowly, and stood. "If you go in," she said. Her voice changed. Quieter. "You must have a way out. They will be watching the road. I will find a way. We will find a way," she corrected him. She looked at her hand, then at his "we need words," words without sound. She held up her hand, 3 fingers extended. "This is hide. There are 3 trees. You are behind them." She made a fist, tight, and pulled it to her chest. "This is her treat." The heart is pulled back. "We go." She paused. Then, slowly, she placed her open palm flat over her own heart. "This," she said, her eyes meeting his. "This is, I trust you. You use this one, only if it is true." Ezra met the gesture, placing his own calloused palm over his heart. "I trust you." She nodded. Once, the pact was made. From the valley below, faint on the wind, a bell began to toll. The thin, reedy sound of Deacon Bly's church. Nayeli turned, her face hardening. She reached into her blouse and her hand found the shell amulet. Closing around it. "He is doing it now," she whispered, her voice full of a cold, terrible understanding. "He is at the church. He is signing the papers. He is not just coming for me. He is taking the others." Ezra looked. He could see the small, dark figures gathering outside the church. He saw 3 small shapes, orphans, from the fever that had swept the lower town. "He is making new wards," Ezra said, his voice flat. "He is building an army of ghosts," Nayeli replied, her hand so tight on the amulet that her knuckles were white. "And he is using my father's grave to do it." The night over Cathedral Butte was cold and star-brittle, smelling of pine resin and the iron tang of the new railroad. Ezra Calloway pulled the brim of his borrowed hat low and took another swig from the bottle. The cheap whiskey burned, and he let a little of it dribble down his chin, staining the front of the filthy wool shirt. He was, to all appearances, a logger 3 sheets to the wind, looking for a place to pass out. He stumbled, caught himself, and hummed a few bars of a song about a girl from Laredo. He was not heading for the bunkhouse. He was heading for the low, solid-looking building that served as the camp office and warehouse. The one place a man like Cade Markham would keep his ledgers and his secrets. High above him, on a dark granite boulder that overlooked the camp like a silent sentinel, Nayeli watched. She was a shadow within a shadow, wrapped in a dark blanket, perfectly still. The moon was a 3/4 crescent, bright enough. In her hand, she held a small, polished disc of trade mirror. She watched Ezra's stumbling. Convincing progress. She saw the guard, a heavy-set man with a rifle, laugh at Ezra and then turn his back to light a cigarette. Nayeli lifted the mirror. A single, sharp flash of moonlight lanced through the darkness and hit the office door. The signal. All clear. One man, looking away. Ezra saw the flash. He did not look up. He stumbled, as if catching his boot, and fell against the office door. His hand went to the lock, not with a key, but with a thin, hard shim of steel he had fashioned in his workshop. He was a carpenter. He understood how things were put together, and how they came apart. There was a faint, metallic snick. He pushed the door, fell inside as if by accident, and pulled it shut behind him. The darkness inside was absolute, thick with the smell of cut timber, stale tobacco, and something else, the faint, acrid stink of Boone Lyle's cheap gun oil. Ezra held his breath, listening. Nothing. just the muffled sounds of the camp outside. He moved from memory, from the layout of every other camp office he had ever seen. He found the desk. He crouched behind it, pulling a match from his boot. He struck it on the floor. The scrape sounded like a rock slide. The small flame illuminated a cluttered desk. And the book, it was a heavy, leather-bound ledger. He opened it. Columns, supplies, transport, wages. He ran his finger down the page. And then he found it. The last column, donations. The entries were not in dollars. They were in names. 3 Apache boys, from the San Carlos agency. Beside it, an entry, Bly H., $50. Another, 1 Paiute girl, orphan. Beside it, Bly H., $20. It was a ledger of souls, a receipt book for human trafficking, blessed by a man of God. He dug deeper, his fingers clumsy with rage and haste. He felt a drawer. It was locked. He used the shim again. It slid open. Inside, a thinner file, wardship agreements. He thumbed through them, his match burning low, and then he saw the name. Greyhawk, John. He pulled the paper out. It was a standard territorial wardship form, granting custody of 1 minor child, Niley Greyhawk, to Deacon Horace Bly, for the purpose of education and spiritual salvation. And at the bottom, a signature. John Greyhawk. Ezra stared at it. The letters were crude, shaky, as if drawn by a child or a man in great pain. It was a clumsy, insulting forgery, a lie written on paper, stamped with a false county seal. This was the weapon Bly was using. This was the cage. A beam of light, sudden and sharp, flashed across his hand and was gone. Hide. He blew the match out, plunging the room back into darkness, and slid into the deep shadow under the desk. He did not have to wait long. The door opened. A man entered, lit by the moonlight from the yard. Ezra smelled him before he saw him, the rank odor of cheap oil. Boone Lyle. Boone shut the door, muttering, "Markham can go to hell. A man needs a drink." He was drunk, fumbling for the lantern he knew was on the desk. He found it, struck a match, and the room was filled with the lantern's yellow, smoky light. He turned, bottle in hand, and saw the open ledger. He saw the open drawer. His drunken expression evaporated. What in the... Ezra moved. He was not a brawler. He was a medic. He knew the body. He rose from the shadow like a wraith, his left arm coming around Boone's chest, pinning his arms. His right hand, fingers stiff, found the side of Boone's neck, pressing the carotid artery against the bone. It was precise, practiced, and silent. Boone did not even have time to cry out. He made a choking, gagging sound. His heavy boot stamped on the floor. He dropped the lantern, which sputtered but did not go out. He thrashed, his body a heavy, panicked weight. But Ezra held on, as relentless as a steel trap, counting the seconds. 1, 2, 3. Boone's struggles weakened. At 7, he was a limp. Ezra let him down gently, a dead weight on the floor. The door creaked open. Ezra spun, his hand on the knife in his boot, ready to finish the job. It was Nayeli. She slipped in, a knife of her own in her hand. She had seen Boone enter. She had seen the light. She had waited. And when the sounds of struggle stopped, she had come. Her eyes took in the scene in a second. Ezra, breathing hard. Boone, unconscious on the floor. The open ledger, the forgery in Ezra's hand. She did not move to the papers. She moved to Boone. Her eyes were cold. On his belt, dangling from a leather thong, was a string of tin badges, a marshal's star from a failed mining town, a deputy's badge from Tucson, trophies, proof of his authority, or his violence. With a flick of her knife, she cut the thong. She held the string of badges in her hand, the metal clicking softly. This was the man from the grave. This was his vanity. This was the proof. He is awake. The voice came from the doorway. Cade Markham stood there, filling the frame, a heavy Colt in his hand. His eyes were not drunk. They were cold, sober, and full of a killing rage. "You two have been busy," Markham sneered. Before the words were even out, he fired. The bullet was not aimed at them. It was aimed at the lantern. The glass exploded. Kerosene and flame erupted, and the room was plunged into a chaos of fire and deep shadow. "The chute!" Ezra roared. He grabbed Nayeli's arm, pulling her away from the spreading flames. He kicked open the back door of the office, which led to the loading yard. The yard was bright with moonlight. Above them, the massive wooden slide, the logging chute, ran from the top of the yard down the steep hillside, a slick highway for timber that ended near the narrow gauge tracks in the ravine below. "Markham?" Boone was awake, choking. "Kill them!" Markham shoved Boone toward the fire and raised his pistol again. A bullet splintered the doorframe by Ezra's head. "Go!" Ezra shoved Nayeli toward the chute. She did not hesitate. She threw herself into the slick, U-shaped trough. Ezra was right behind her. The slide was a terrifying, splintering blur. The wood was greased, and they shot down the hillside at an impossible speed, the wind tearing at them, sawdust flying in their faces. Above them, the dark shape of Markham fired again and again. The muzzle flashes like angry stars, the bullets whining past them in the dark. They hit the bottom in a jarring crash, landing on a four-wheeled ore cart that sat on the tracks. They sprawled across the rough wooden planks, bruised and breathless. "The track!" Nayeli yelled, pointing. It ran straight down, into the blackness of the ravine. Ezra got to his feet on the unstable cart. He saw Markham, a dark figure on the ridge, reloading. Ezra put his shoulder to the cart's side and heaved. It groaned, resisted, then began to move. The wheels screamed, a high-pitched shriek of metal on metal as they bit the track. The cart leaped forward, plunging into the dark. Bullets thwacked into the wood around them. Ping, a shot ricocheted off the steel axle. "Get down!" Ezra yelled. He grabbed Nayeli, pulling her flat to the wooden bed. As another shot came, he threw his own body over hers, shielding her, tucking her beneath his chin, his coat covering her head. The cart was careening now, rocking wildly, the ravine walls a black blur on either side. He could feel her, rigid but not trembling, her heart hammering against his. He risked a look. She was staring up at him. Her eyes were wide, dark, and utterly alive. In the flashes of moonlight that broke through the canyon, he saw no fear. He saw a shared, wild pulse. As the cart slammed over a rough join in the track, she moved one hand. She did not grab him. She did not push him away. She pressed her open palm flat against his chest. Her fingers splayed over his heart. The signal, "I trust you." He looked into her eyes, and he nodded. A single, sharp motion. "I trust you." The tracks ended. The cart hit the gravel bar, leaped into the air, and smashed onto the rocks, throwing them clear. They landed in the shallows of the icy creek, the impact knocking the breath from them. They scrambled, gasping, soaked and frozen, and dragged themselves behind a thicket of yucca, the stalks sharp and skeletal. They lay flat on the gravel, listening. Above them, on the ridge, they heard shouting. Markham's voice, thin and furious. "They are in the wash. They are gone. Damn it, get back to the camp." A pause. "Do not worry. I will find them. I will get that merchandise back for Bly, or I will die trying." Then, another voice, high and panicked. It was Boone. "Cade, my badges. She took my badges. They were at the grave. That woman. She saw them. We have to go back. We have to get that body. We have to burn it. Burn it all." The voices faded. Ezra and Nayeli looked at each other in the cold, wet dark. He sat up, his back against a stone, the adrenaline draining away, leaving a bone-deep cold. "You are bleeding," she whispered. He looked down. His left forearm was soaked, a long, dark gash, either from a splinter or a bullet graze, was welling blood. "It is a scratch. Be still." She was all business. She tore a long strip from the hem of her underskirt. In the moonlight, the color was unmistakable. It was a deep, vibrant red, the color of the paint on the hide string. "In my father's house," she said, her voice low, her hands wrapping the cloth around his arm, her touch firm and sure. "Red is the color of the sun's path. It is a living oath, a promise to walk in beauty, even when there is none." She tied the knot, tight. The red bandage was a stark, bright line against his skin. It was not a medic's dressing, it was a promise. They sat, the icy water of the creek swirling around their boots, the sound of their own breathing loud in the new silence. They had the ledger, they had the forgery, they had the badges, and Markham and Boone knew it. The fight was no longer in the shadows. It was coming to the light. It was coming to John Greyhawk's grave. The sun was high and harsh by 10 the next morning, bleaching the color from the dust of Mesquite Crossing's main square. Deacon Horace Bly had posted a notice. He stood on the porch of the Territorial Hotel, a self-appointed stage, holding a sheaf of papers. A crowd had gathered. Not a large crowd, but a dangerous one, a mix of nervous merchants, hard-eyed men from the logging camp, and a few townswomen, their faces pinched with piety and fear. Bly let the murmur build before raising his hand for silence. His black coat was immaculate. His voice, when it came, was not loud, but it carried, oiled with righteousness. "My friends, my fellow citizens in this wild, but promising land, we are gathered today for an act of Christian charity, an act of law. As many of you know, the territory, in its wisdom, provides for the unfortunate. It provides for the orphan, for the lost soul wandering in the darkness. We are here to bring one such soul into the light." He held up a single piece of paper. "The forged wardship agreement. By the authority of the Arizona Territory and the magistrate of this county, I have been granted legal wardship of the minor child, Nayeli Greyhawk." A gasp went through the crowd. Some nodded, as if this were a great good. Others looked at the ground. "She is to be placed in my care," Bly continued. "For her education, her protection, and the salvation of her immortal soul, she will be taken to the Verde Mission School this afternoon, where her journey to civilization will begin." "That is a lie." The voice came from the edge of the square. The crowd turned, parting like water. Ezra Calloway stood there, his face set. Beside him, her head high, was Nayeli. She was not dressed as a victim. She wore her blue velvet. Her hair was neat, and she carried her father's digging stick in her hand, holding it not as a weapon, but as a staff of office. Bly's smile was thin. "Mr. Calloway, you are a carpenter. I am a man of God, acting with the full authority of the law. This does not concern you." "It concerns a murder," Ezra said, his voice a flat, cold counterpoint to Bly's melody. Sheriff Alma Ruiz pushed through the crowd, her hand not on her gun, but her badge in plain sight. "Deacon Ezra, this is a public square, not a courtroom. What is this?" "It is simple, Sheriff," Bly said smoothly. "I have a legal document, a wardship paper, signed and sealed, granting me custody of this woman. She is, by law, my responsibility. And I have evidence," Ezra said, "that this document is part of a conspiracy to commit murder and human trafficking." The word murder hit the crowd with the force of a physical blow. Evidence. Alma Ruiz's eyes were sharp. She looked at Ezra. "Show me, now." Ezra stepped forward. He held up the heavy ledger they had taken from the fire. This, Cade Markham's paybook, full of entries for donations, the price for human beings, 3 Apache boys, a Paiute girl, all sold to you. "Bly." Bly laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "A stolen book of business, a disgruntled employee. Perhaps this is slander. Sheriff, it is not evidence. It is not notarized. This, then," Nayeli said. Her voice was quiet, but it silenced the square. She stepped forward and held up the string of tin badges, holding them by the thongs so they clicked together in the sun. "This, from the belt of Boone Lyle. He dropped it at my father's grave, the night he and Markham dug there, trying to hide the bullet." A woman in the crowd crossed herself. Bly's eyes narrowed. For the first time, a flicker of unease. Trinkets, baubles. What does this prove? The man is a known drunkard. This is a circus. "Save her soul," a man in the back shouted. A logger Ezra recognized. She is a heathen. Let the deacon do his work. Save her, save the girl. A woman echoed, her voice high and afraid. The crowd surged. A wave of fear and suspicion. Several women, who had perhaps traded at the same store as Nayeli, looked at her with a terrible, helpless pity. They saw a woman trapped, but they were too afraid of the law, and of the church, to speak. Ezra raised his voice. You talk about her soul. You talk about her like she is a sack of grain, but you do not let her speak. He turned and faced the crowd. This is a wardship. It cannot be a chain. If it is voluntary, if it is for her own good, then the first person to agree should be her. Let her speak. Bly started to object. She is a savage. She cannot legally. Let her speak. Alma Ruiz's voice cut like a whip. She looked at Nayeli. Well, girl, you have the floor. The square was silent. Every eye was on Nayeli. She stood, small but not weak, framed by the raw lumber of the town. She did not look at Ezra. She did not look at Bly. She looked at the faces of the town, the women in their bonnets, the men in their dusty hats. She was measuring them. When she spoke, her English was perfect. It was better than that of the loggers who had shouted at her. My name is Nayeli Greyhawk. I am the daughter of John Greyhawk. I am Dine. I am not a minor child. I am a woman of 20 years. She took a step forward. Mr. Bly says he will civilize me. He says he will educate me. But he is the man who paid for the forged signature of my murdered father. He is the man who profits from stolen children. I have seen his book. I have seen the price on my own soul. Lies, Bly roared. Slander, Sheriff. This is madness. I am not voluntary. Nayeli said, her voice rising, clear and strong as a bell. I am a citizen of this territory. I am not property. I stand here, in this square, and I ask for the law. The real law. Not his. She turned and looked directly at Alma Ruiz. I demand the right of simple habeas corpus. You cannot give me to him. You cannot let him take me. I have the right to be seen by a federal judge, not a county magistrate on a man's payroll. Until a federal court in Prescott reviews this paper, I demand protection. I demand to be allowed to remain. I am not his ward. I am a free woman, and I am his accuser. The silence that followed was total. She had done it. She had used their own weapon, their own language, their own law. She had named habeas corpus the right to one's own body, the great writ against unlawful detention, and in doing so, had proven she was anything but the savage Bly described. She had, in one speech, undone his entire argument. Alma Ruiz looked stunned, and then, for a brief second, a look of profound, grudging respect passed over her face. Bly was purple. He saw the crowd waver. He saw the respect in the sheriff's eyes. He had lost control. This is an outrage, he thundered, his piety gone, replaced by the raw face of power. Sheriff, I have a legal paper. You have your orders. I am holding you responsible if you will not enforce the law. I will. I am deputizing a posse, led by Mr. Markham, to retrieve this fugitive, and deliver her to the mission. The law of the county is on my side. You do this, Ruiz, or I will have your badge. The threat hung in the air. Alma looked at Bly. She looked at Markham, who was at the edge of the crowd, his hand on his gun, a smirk on his face. She looked at the 20 other rough men from the logging camp who stood with him, and she looked at Ezra and Nayeli, 2 people against an army. She was a woman of the law, but the law had just been torn in 2. Alma Ruiz's shoulders slumped. Just a fraction. I keep the peace. Deacon, I do not start wars. I cannot, and will not, fire on 24 men over a legal disagreement. My job is to prevent a riot. She unpinned her badge and held it in her palm. This is not a badge for this fight. I am not taking sides. I am holding the line. That is all. Her eyes met Ezra's. Her look was not an apology. It was a warning. I cannot help you. Prepare. Bly smiled. A victor's smile. It is settled. The posse will ride at sundown. Be ready, girl. He turned and strode back into the hotel. The crowd dissolved, melting away, afraid to be seen talking to the condemned. They were alone in the square, Ezra and Nayeli, in a circle of hostile dust. As they turned to leave, a small, gray-haired woman stepped out from the doorway of the dry goods store. It was Mrs. Gable, the proprietor. She was a Quaker, a woman who spoke little. She walked past them, not looking at them. But as she passed Nayeli, she pressed something into her hand. It was a large roll of thick, white flannel. "For the cold days," the woman whispered, never breaking her stride. "God keep you, child." Nayeli looked down at the soft, clean cloth. It was a small, practical kindness. It was a thread. It was a sign that the town's conscience was not dead. It was just sleeping. That night, they did not use the key to the warehouse. It was the first place Markham would look. They went to the cemetery, to the one place that was already unholy, the one place they knew they had to be. They sat in the dark, their backs against a granite marker, watching the grave of John Greyhawk. They were waiting for Boone and Markham to come and destroy the evidence. As the moon rose, Nayeli went to her father's grave. She knelt, her hand tracing the rough wood, and then she stopped. "Ezra," she whispered. He was at her side in a second. There, at the base of the grave, was a new offering. Not silver, not proof. It was a small, tightly woven wreath of dried lilac. Nayeli touched it, her fingers gentle. She lifted it to her face, inhaling the faint, sweet, tea-like scent. "I know this smell," she said, a strange, new hope in her voice. "When I was a girl, my father would trade for medicine at the old mission. Before Bly, there was a nun. She had a garden. She taught me the English names for flowers." She looked at Ezra, her eyes clear in the moonlight. "Her name was Mary Collins. Sister Mary. She smelled of this. Always." The sound of a boot scraping gravel made Ezra move, his hand finding the grip of his knife. He and Nayeli were on their feet in the same instant, pressed into the shadow of the granite marker. "Stay down, Carpenter." Alma Ruiz's voice was low, tired. She stepped into the moonlight. "Alone. You two have a talent for picking the most obvious place in the territory to hide. We were not hiding," Nayeli said, her voice steady. "We were waiting." Alma looked at the wreath of dried lilacs on the grave. A small, unreadable expression passed over her face. "Seems you found a friend," she sighed, a puff of white in the cold air. "The posse is not riding tonight. Markham and Boone are at the bell, getting loud. They think you are halfway to Prescott. They are wrong. They will come here at dawn to dig up the grave and burn whatever is left. They are loud, but they are not stupid." "We will be ready for them," Ezra said. "No, you will not," Alma said, her voice sharp. "Because you are not going to be here. You are coming with me. Sister Mary Collins wants to talk to you, and she is the only person in this town, other than me, who is not a fool or a coward. And I am close to being a fool myself." The old convent was a mile out of town, a sagging adobe ruin that had been abandoned when the new church was built. But one wing was still kept, a small, clean room with a single fireplace, and a garden that was, even in late autumn, meticulously weeded. The air inside smelled of dried herbs, lye soap, and the sweet, lingering scent of lilacs. Sister Mary Collins was a small woman, bird-like, wrapped in a gray wool shawl. Her face was a web of fine lines, but her eyes were the eyes of a hawk, bright and unblinking. She was the woman Ezra had seen in the cemetery, the one who had left the proof. She looked at Nayeli, a long, appraising look. "You have your father's eyes," she said, her voice a dry rustle. "He was a good man, John Greyhawk. He was a proud man. He did not deserve to die in the dirt for a piece of paper." She turned to Ezra. "And you, the carpenter, you brought the silver. I was watching. I have been watching for a year. I knew Bly was a viper, but I did not know he was a merchant. Until I saw your silver. I knew what it was. It was conscience money. I was there," Ezra said, his voice thick. "The land office. I fired." "You did," Sister Mary said, nodding. "And you hit your mark. You saved Sheriff Brody's life, and Boone Lyle never forgave you for it. But your bullet did not kill John. I have prayed for a year. I left the proof for you to find. But there is more. There is always more. She went to a small, carved chest, the only fine piece of furniture in the room. From it, she took a book. It was a simple diary, bound in worn black leather, the kind a merchant might use. I was the mission's record keeper for 10 years. She said, before Deacon Bly arrived and turned the house of God into a counting house, I continued to keep the records, even after our tired. I write down what I see. She handed the book to Naomi. Bly is a very careful man, Sister Mary said, her voice cold. He believes he has a contract with God, and with the railroad. He is building a new chapel, a stone chapel, with stained glass from St. Louis. But the railroad only pays for results, and the territorial fund only pays for souls. Saved souls. Wards. Naomi opened the book. Ezra lit a candle from the fireplace, and they bent over the pages. The entries were meticulous. Dates, names, amounts. It was the same as the ledger from Cathedral Butte, but from the other side. Received from C. Markham. For the indenture of 3 Apache wards, $60. Applied to stone contract. Received from the Verde Spur Survey. For the securing of land titles via wardship, $100. It was a cold, neat accounting of Bly's ambition. He was selling children, selling their futures, to build a monument to his own piety. He is a monster, Ezra whispered. He is a businessman, Sister Mary corrected, which is often worse. Naomi turned the page. Her hand stopped. The entry was from a year ago, the night her father died. Read it, Sister Mary said, her voice soft. Read it aloud. Let the air hear the truth. Naomi's voice was low, but it did not tremble. October 12th, 1883. John Greyhawk came to see me. He was angry. He said Bly had offered him money, then a contract to sign his name, to give Naomi to the mission. He refused. He said he would not trade his daughter for a piece of paper. He went to find Bly at the land office. He knew Bly was meeting Markham. Her finger traced the next line. 10 o'clock. I heard shouting from the street. The robbery, the gunshots. It was over so quickly. But after the main shots, I heard a sound. A single, small shot. Not the heavy rifle. A pistol. From the alley behind the land office. I looked from my window. I saw them. Markham, holding John. John was hurt. He was bleeding from his head, but he was alive. And Boone Lyle. Boone was there. And Deacon Bly. She paused, taking a ragged breath. Ezra put his hand on her shoulder, not to comfort, but to steady. The red cloth was bright against his skin. She continued. Bly was holding a paper. The wardship paper. He told John to sign it. Sign it, you heathen, and I will have the medic see to you. John. John spat at him. He said, I will die first, Markham. Markham hit him. He hit him with the butt of his pistol. John fell, Bly said. He is no use to us. He has seen the paper. And Boone Lyle. He drew his pistol. A small .32. He shot him. He shot my father. The room was silent, save for the crackle of the fire. Bly gave the sermon himself. Sister Mary said, her eyes closed. He buried him before noon the next day. He said it was a mercy to get the dead underground. He was burying his sin. Naomi turned the page. Tucked into the diary, yellowed and folded, was a piece of cheap brown paper, the kind used for wrapping salt. On it, in the same crude, labored handwriting as the forgery, were a few words. That is not my writing, Sister Mary said. That was in his pocket when they brought him in. I took it. I kept it. I knew one day you would need it. Naomi unfolded the paper. She recognized the hand. Her father. He had been learning to write. In secret. She read the words, her voice breaking for the first time. The tears coming. My daughter. If you read this, they want you. Do not let them live like water. The stone does not break the water. The water wears down the stone. Live and wear them down. She closed the book. She sank onto the small bench, her shoulders shaking, not with sobs, but with a year of held back. Terrible grief. Ezra looked at the floor. The weight that had been in his gut for a year was gone, replaced by something heavier, a cold, hard clarity. He had come to the grave to pay a debt. He had placed $2 silver on the dirt, a payment for his own soul. But he had been wrong. His act, born of guilt, had not been a payment. It had been a catalyst. It was the first drop of water on the stone. His $2 silver had been the thing that terrified Sister Mary, that made Bly move, that started the avalanche. He looked at Nayeli, who was wiping her tears, her jaw set. "Your money," she said, her voice thick. "The $2 silver, the one Sister Mary took. They are here, the nun said." She retrieved them from the chest. They were dull, heavy. Nayeli looked at them in Ezra's hand. The money was in the wrong place. She said, her voice hard. "You put it on his grave, on the silence. It belongs on the truth. It belongs on Bly." Ezra understood. He closed his hand around the coins. "Tomorrow, at the dedication." "The dedication?" Alma Ruiz asked, her voice sharp. She had been standing by the door, silent, her face a mask. "The stone chapel?" Sister Mary said, "It is finished. Bly is dedicating it tomorrow. The Verde Spur train is making a special stop. He is bringing all his words, the new ones, to show the investors, to show them how civilized he is. It is a performance, a long, thin whistle, mournful and sharp, cut through the night. It was the sound of the future. The Verde Spur, making its way up the mountain, ready for the morning. He will have them all there, Nayeli said, standing. He will have the children. Alma Ruiz looked at Ezra. Sundown. He said, "He will send Markham at sundown. But the dedication, that is at noon. He will be busy. He will not expect us to walk into his church." Ezra said, "No." Alma said, "He will not." She looked at the three of them. "The carpenter, the woman, the nun. This is what I will do. I cannot stop Markham, and I cannot stop Bly. Not with a badge, but I can protect the innocent. I will be at that dedication. I will gather the women of this town, Mrs. Gable, and the others. We will make a line. We will stand between Bly and those children. We will be a shield of moral concern. He cannot shoot a line of praying women, not in front of the investors." She turned to Ezra. Her face was hard. "But that is all I can do. I can protect the children. I cannot protect you. When the shooting starts, Carpenter, you are on your own." Ezra nodded. "That is all I ask." Alma left. Sister Mary gave them her small room. "Rest. You will need it." They did not rest. They sat by the fire, the diary on the table between them. The town slept. The railroad slept. Ezra took the hunting knife from his boot. It was a good, balanced blade. He pulled a small whetstone from his pocket and began to draw the blade across it. The shh of steel on stone, the only sound. He was a carpenter. He was a medic. He was a man who prepared his tools. Nayeli watched him. She watched the firelight play on the hard lines of his face. She took the red cloth from his arm. The wound had closed, a clean line. She took the cloth, tore it into a long, thin strip, and went to her bag. She pulled out the length of hide string they had found, the one with the red paint. She sat down across from him. She took the knife from his hands. She held the handle, the simple wooden grip, and she began to work. She wrapped the hide string tight, and then she began to braid the red cloth, weaving it in and out, over and under, her fingers moving with a deft, ancient rhythm. She was a weaver. She was a survivor. She was binding her oath to his steel. She was binding her tradition to his anger. She was binding the red thread of a living promise to a tool of death. When she was finished, she handed it back. The handle was no longer just wood. It was red, and it was bound. 2 traditions, 2 pasts, 1 vow. Ezra took the knife. It fit his hand. The new binding, a warm, sure grip. He looked at her, and in the quiet, he finally learned. He took the $2 silver, and he began to practice. He practiced flipping them, catching them, making them spin. He was not a card sharp, but he would be. He was a carpenter, and he was building a trap. The morning of the dedication dawned bright and cold, with a wind that smelled of iron. The new stone chapel sat on the hill above Mesquite Crossing, a monument of pale gray rock, its steeple sharp against the high, empty blue below in the valley. The Verde Spur locomotive idled, its plume of black smoke a smudge against the clean air, a sign that the Eastern investors had arrived. Deacon Horace Bly was in his element. This was his triumph, the day his ambition was given form in mortar and stone. His performance began not at the chapel, but at the cemetery. He led the procession. Behind him, the 3 new orphans, 2 boys and a girl, walked with their heads down, their new, ill-fitting wool clothes scratching their necks. They were his props, his living proof of salvation. Behind them walked the investors, men in dark suits, looking uncomfortable in the dust, and a few of the town's faithful. Bly led them through the wire gate of Juniper Mesa. He led them past the sagging markers, his voice a resonant drum, speaking of a new day and taming this savage wilderness. And he stopped, as if by divine guidance, directly in front of the crude wooden cross marking John Greyhawk's grave. "Here," Bly announced, his voice carrying to the investors. "Here we stand on the very ground of our struggle, a place of heathen ways, of darkness. Today, we consecrate this ground. We cleanse it with prayer. We claim this land and the souls upon it. For the one true God," he opened his Bible, his black-gloved finger finding a passage. He began to read, his voice rising in manufactured passion. A sermon of damnation and redemption. The children flinched. The investors looked solemn. "Stop!" The word was not a shout. It was quiet, hard, and it cut through Bly's performance like an axe. Ezra Calloway stepped out from behind a tall cluster of juniper. He was not dressed for church. He was dressed for work, his carpenter's bag on his hip, the red-handled knife visible in his boot. He walked past the investors, who parted for him, their eyes wide. He walked past the orphans. He stopped at the foot of John Greyhawk's grave, opposite the deacon. Bly's eyes went flat, all piety gone, replaced by a cold, reptilian fury. "You dare interrupt the word of God?" "Calloway, this is not the word of God," Ezra said, his voice clear and loud. "Meant for the investors, for the town, for the wind itself. This is a business transaction." From his pocket, he took the 2 silver dollars. He held them up, the sun flashing on the metal. "These, a year ago, I put these here, a payment for my conscience. I thought I might have been responsible for this man's death." He knelt, and with a deliberate, audible clink, he placed the 2 coins flat on the wooden marker. He stood. "But I was wrong. My bullet did not kill him. And this is not redemption money." He looked Bly square in the eye. "It is evidence of a soul-selling transaction. The price you paid Cade Markham? The price of a man's life." Bly's face went white. He had lost the crowd. The investors were murmuring, looking at each other, then at Bly. "This is blasphemy." Bly roared, but his voice was strained. He made a sharp, jerking gesture with his head. "Markham sees this man. He is disturbing the peace. He is a lunatic, Cade Markham, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd, his hand on his gun, grinned. This, he understood. He and another logger moved, grabbing Ezra's arms, twisting them behind his back with a practiced, painful force. In the same instant, a cold circle of steel pressed into Nayeli's back. She had been standing near the edge of the graves, watching. Boone Lyle had moved behind her, silent as a snake. "Do not move." "Savage," Boone hissed, the smell of his cheap oil thick in her nostrils. "Do not even breathe." Bly, his control restored, smiled. He was in charge again. He had the gun, he had the muscle, he had the law. He walked to Nayeli, looking down at her, his face a mask of false pity. "Child," he said, his voice oozing concern. "You are confused. You are distraught. You have been led astray by this violent man." He reached into his coat. He did not pull out a Bible. He pulled out a piece of paper, a new contract. "But there is still hope for you. I am a forgiving man." He held the paper out to her, along with a small, Silver pen. This is a new agreement. It voids the other one. The one your father failed to sign. This one is for you. Sign it. Sign, and agree to serve the new chapel for 3 years. In return, I will personally see that you are taught to read. You will be given a new life. A clean life. He held the pen closer. Sign it, or I will have Mr. Boone here take you. And he will not be as gentle as my posse. Sign it, and I will even forget Calloway's outburst. It is a simple choice. Child, salvation, or ruin. The cemetery was silent. Markham's knuckles were white as he held Ezra. Boone's gun was a hard, painful knot in Nayeli's spine. Ezra watched her, his face granite, his eyes burning into hers. He did not struggle. He just watched her. He trusted her. Nayeli looked at the paper, at the promise of reading that was nothing but a 3-year slave contract. She looked at the $2 silver shining on her father's grave. She looked at Bly's triumphant, expectant face. Then she looked at Ezra. She saw the pain he was in, the way Markham held him. She saw the red-bound knife in his boot. She saw the trust in his eyes. He was not asking her to be safe. He was asking her to be true. She turned her gaze back to Bly. She lifted her chin, and she spoke the words that had been waiting for a year. I'd rather die. The words, her words, hung in the cold air. They were not a plea. They were a judgment. They were a declaration of war. For a second, Bly was frozen in disbelief. That second was all Ezra needed. Now, Alma Ezra roared. He did not wait for Markham to react. He was a carpenter. His bag was at his hip. He snapped his body forward, a violent twist, and his hand plunged into the bag. He came out with a fistful of white powder, hydrated lime, used for whitewash, for marking wood, for setting foundations. He threw it, not at Bly, but directly into Cade Markham's wide, sneering face. Markham screamed. It was not a yell. It was a high, thin shriek of pure, blinding agony. He released Ezra, his hands clawing at his eyes, the white powder caking his face like a death mask. In the same instant, a police whistle split the air, shrill and clear. Alma Ruiz, standing by the gate, blew it again. Now, she yelled. Townsfolk, protect the children. It was not a posse that answered. It was Mrs. Gable from the dry goods store. It was Sister Mary Collins. It was a dozen other women from the town who surged forward, their faces set. They were not armed. They were a wall of calico and wool. They ran past the fight, grabbed the 3 terrified orphans, and dragged them back toward the gate, shielding them with their own bodies. The investors, panicked, scattered, running for their train. The cemetery exploded into chaos. The loggers who had come with Markham charged Ezra. It was a brawl, a desperate, ugly fight among the tombstones. Ezra, free, fought with the cold precision of a medic who knew anatomy. He did not punch. He struck, a blow to the throat, an elbow to the ribs. Boone Lyle, seeing his chance, grabbed Nayeli's arm, trying to drag her away as a hostage. You are coming with me, girl. She did not pull back. She went with the motion, turning, pivoting on her heel. As he stumbled, off balance, she brought her knee up, hard, into his thigh, just above the kneecap. A crippling blow. Boone howled, his grip loosening. He raised his pistol to strike her. She moved, not like a brawler, but like water. Her hand flashed to her boot and came out holding the red-handled knife. She did not stab. She did not slash. She brought the heavy, bound handle down in a short, brutal arc, directly onto the bones of his wrist. There was a sharp, wet crack. The gun flew from his numb fingers, clattering onto the gravel. Boone crumpled, hissing, clutching his broken wrist. She did not look at him again. The fight was over in seconds. The remaining loggers, seeing Markham blinded and Boone disarmed, their leader gone, stopped. Deacon Horace Bly stood alone, his Bible in the dirt, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated terror. His plan, his church, his reputation, all of it was in ruins. He did the only thing he could. He turned and ran. He ran from the cemetery, from the bodies, from the truth. He ran toward his one true fortress, his stone chapel. Ezra and Nayeli saw him. They looked at each other, a single, shared understanding. This was not over. They ran, vaulting the low stone wall, leaving the chaos of the graveyard behind. They ran through the sharp, skeletal yucca, their boots pounding the red earth. Above them, in the chapel steeple, the bell began to ring, a wild, panicked, clanging sound, as if pulled by a madman. They reached the massive, arched oak doors of the new chapel just as Bly threw his weight against them from the inside. The doors slammed shut with the finality of a coffin lid. A heavy wooden bar dropped into place, the thud echoing through the wood. Ezra and Nayeli stood on the steps, breathing hard, the bell still clanging madly above them. From inside the stone walls, they heard a new sound. It was Bly's voice. He was not praying. He was chanting, a high-pitched, garbled, desperate stream of broken scripture and curses. The second part of the battle had begun. The heavy oak doors of the chapel were a fortress wall. From inside, the mad, clanging bell finally stopped, replaced by a more terrifying sound, the heavy, metallic thud of a safe door closing, and the click of its tumbler. Bly was not just hiding. He was securing his crimes. Ezra pressed his ear to the wood, then to the stone. He was a carpenter. He understood structures. "New stone," he muttered. "The mortar is still curing. He built it fast. He built it cheap." Nayeli stood back, her eyes scanning the building. It was a box, solid and impenetrable. "There is no way in. There is always a way in," Ezra said. He ran to the side, following the wall. He would have built the walls first, put the roof on, then the doors. The weak point is always where new meets old. He found it at the back, a small, secondary door, likely leading to a vestry or office. It was as solid as the front, but the frame was set directly into the new stone, and above it, a massive, rough-hewn pine beam acted as the lintel, supporting the arch of the wall above. Ezra examined it. He used green wood, he said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. "It has shrunk. The pins." He took his carpenter's awl and probed the joint where the beam met the stone. "They are just wooden dowels, driven in to hold it while the mortar set. If I can drive out the pins, the whole frame will shift." "You need time," Nayeli said, "and a distraction." As if on cue, Alma Ruiz arrived, her face grim. She was not alone. The women of the town were with her, Mrs. Gable and Sister Mary at the front, the investors. Seeing a formidable sheriff and a crowd of determined women, had stopped their panicked retreat and were watching from a safe distance near their train. Deacon Bly. Alma's voice was pure, carrying authority. "This is Sheriff Ruiz. You are surrounded. You are charged with kidnapping, fraud, and accessory to the murder of John Greyhawk. Open this door and come out." A voice, high-pitched and distorted, screamed from within. "I am a man of God. This is my house. You are the trespassers. I have the contracts. I have the law. I am barricaded. He has the ledger," Ezra told Alma. "The real one. All the names, all the payments. His hostage is a safe," Alma said, her disgust plain. She looked at the crowd. "This is a siege. It ends now." Nayeli touched Ezra's arm. "A distraction." She pointed up. The roof was steep, covered in new terracotta tiles. From the ridge, she would have a clear view of the entire town, of the investors, of the chaos in the cemetery. She held up her small trade mirror. Ezra understood. "It is too steep. I have climbed the rim since I was a child. This is just a small stone," she said. She found a stack of unused lumber and, with the grace of a mountain cat, was halfway up before he could object. She gained the ridge, a small, dark figure against the sky. She did not use the mirror to signal Ezra. She used it to signal the town. She angled it, catching the noon sun, and flashed it at the women. At Alma, a simple, repeated code. "We are here. He is trapped. The truth is inside." Then she flashed it toward the cemetery. A roar of pure rage answered. Cade Markham. His face was a raw, red mask of chemical burns. His eyes swollen, nearly shut. But he could see shapes. He could see the flash of light from the roof. He saw the woman who had helped blind him. He grabbed a rifle from one of his men. "He is going to shoot her," Alma yelled. Markham raised the rifle, firing wildly. His aim destroyed, but his rage intact. A bullet smashed into a tile near Nayeli's feet, exploding it into dust. She did not flinch. She held her ground. Markham Alma Ruiz's voice was a steel whip. She had her pistol out, not aimed at Markham, but at the sky. She fired. Once. The shot was deafening. Markham paused, trying to find her in his ruined vision. "Put the gun down." "Cade," Alma said, walking into the open, her badge shining. "You are finished. Look around you. The investors see you. The town sees you. You are a hired murderer, and your boss is a coward in a box. It is over." Markham, weeping with rage and pain, his vision swimming, lowered the rifle. He saw the wall of women. He saw the investors watching in horror. He saw his own men backing away. He was alone. Alma walked up to him, her face like stone, and took the rifle from his hands. She did not arrest him. Not yet. She had just disarmed him in front of the world, breaking his power more completely than a bullet ever could. "Now!" "Ezra," she yelled. Ezra did not need to be told. He had his carpenter's mallet and a long, steel chisel. He placed the chisel against the first wooden dowel and struck. The sound was a heavy, jarring thud. He struck again, and again. The pin was green wood, stubborn, but it was moving. Inside. Bly heard the noise, a frantic hammering. "Stop it, in the name of God. I command you." Thud! The pin was halfway out. Thud! It was free. Ezra moved to the other side. Thud! Thud! He slammed his shoulder into the door frame. The entire structure groaned. The lintel, its pins gone, shifted a fraction of an inch. A gap opened, no wider than a man's hand, where the door frame met the stone. "It is not enough," he panted, his shoulder bruised. "It is enough for me," Nayeli said. She was at his side, covered in roof dust. She had come down the moment Markham was disarmed. She handed him the small, precious bundle of the forged wardship paper and Boone's badges. "If I do not come out, give this to Alma. It is enough, Nayeli." She placed her hand on his heart. The signal. "I trust you." Then she turned, and like a snake, she was through the gap. She was inside. The chapel was dark, the only light coming from the new, garish stained glass windows. The air was cold, smelling of plaster and new paint. Deacon Bly stood by the altar, his face a mask of sweat, his eyes wild. Beside him was the heavy iron safe. He saw her. He had not expected her. He had expected Ezra. "Witch," he screamed, and he lunged. Nayeli did not run for the door. She ran for the safe. It was open. The ledger, the real one, was sitting on top of a stack of papers. She grabbed it. Bly was on her. He was a strong man, his body fed by the town's tithes. He grabbed her hair, pulling her back, his other hand clawing for the ledger. "It is mine, the mission's property, God's property." He threw her against the altar. She fell, the book flying from her hands, skidding across the floor. She rolled, coming up with a red-handled knife in her hand. She held it, not to stab, but to ward him off. "It is over. Bly. The town knows. The town knows nothing." He spat, his eyes on the knife. He was afraid of her. He looked around, desperate. He saw the heavy brass bell on the altar, the one used for communion. He grabbed it. He lunged at her again, raising the bell to strike. Nayeli dodged, but as she moved, the red-wrapped handle of her knife, the one she had braided with an oath, caught the small, silver hammer of the bell. It was not a loud sound. It was not the mad clanging from the steeple. It was a single, pure, devastatingly clear clang. The sound rang through the chapel, through the gap in the door, and out into the sunlit square. The front doors of the chapel burst open. It was not Ezra. It was the crowd. Alma Ruiz, the investors, Mrs. Gable, Sister Mary, and a dozen townsfolk. Their fear finally burned away by curiosity and rage. They had heard the single sharp ring of the altar bell, a sound of violation, and had broken the bar. They stopped, frozen. They saw their man of God, his face contorted in a mask of fury, raising a heavy brass bell to strike a woman who was holding a knife. They saw the open safe. They saw the ledger, the book of accounts, lying between them on the chapel floor. It was a tableau of absolute, damning truth. Bly froze, his arm in the air. He saw the faces. He saw the investors. He saw his stone chapel, his monument, become his tomb. She attacked me, he whimpered, the bell clattering from his numb fingers. The savage. She tried to steal from the church. Alma Ruiz walked forward. She did not draw her gun. She pulled a pair of steel handcuffs from her belt. Deacon Horace Bly, she said, her voice cold and formal. You are under arrest for the kidnapping of 3 minors, for conspiracy to commit fraud, and for the murder of John Greyhawk. She snapped the cuffs onto his wrists. The sound was as final as a gavel. Markham, his eyes streaming, saw it all from the doorway. He saw Bly cuffed. He saw his power, his protection, his money, all gone. He turned and ran. He did not run for his horse. He ran for the railroad tracks, the one line of escape. But Ezra was waiting. He had seen the look in Markham's eyes. As Markham ran past the woodpile, Ezra stepped out. He was not holding a gun. He was holding his carpenter's mallet. He swung it once, a short, clean arc that connected with Markham's temple. The man dropped like a felled tree, silent and immediate, in the cemetery. Boone Lyle, clutching his broken wrist, saw his boss fall. He saw the sheriff leading Bly out of the chapel in chains. He saw the entire town, silent, watching him. He stood up, slowly, his one good hand in the air. He began to weep, his voice high and thin. It was not me. It was him. It was Bly. He made us do it. He told us to get the paper John would not sign. I shot him. But it was click. It was Bly's orders to cover the papers. Sister Mary Collins, standing nearby, nodded. He has confessed, she said, her voice loud for all to hear. Before God and before this town. The great doors of the chapel were open. Alma led Bly away. Ezra retrieved his mallet. Nayeli stood alone in the center of the chapel. She picked up the ledger. She picked up her knife. A gust of wind, clean and cold from the high desert, blew through the open doors. It swirled through the aisle, smelling of juniper and red dust. It found the candles on the altar, and one by one, it snuffed them out, leaving the smell of smoke and the clean, cold light of the truth. The moral order had returned. Not with a prayer, but with the wind. The town was a low, humming thing in the valley, its wounds still open. But Ezra and Nayeli did not go back. Not that night. They rode to the one place that held a clean memory, the high, quiet canyon of Willow Notch. The air was cold, but the spring-fed creek still flowed, a silver thread in the moonlight. Ezra, the carpenter, built a small, contained fire. He was a man who knew how to build, how to make a shelter. He moved with a quiet economy of motion, the anger of the day replaced by a deep, bone-weary calm. Nayeli sat on a flat stone, her wool blanket pulled around her shoulders. She watched him. She watched his hands, scarred and sure, as they stacked the dry mesquite when the fire was a small, steady pulse of orange. She reached into her bag. She took out the small leather pouch. From it, she took the pearlescent shell amulet, her father's truth. She placed it on the rock beside her. Then she took the 2 silver dollars. They were heavy, dull in the firelight. She placed them next to the amulet. The truth and the price. The shell was luminous. The silver was dead. The truth had won. They sat in silence for a long time. The only sound, the crackle of the fire and the whisper of the creek. He confessed. Ezra said, his voice low. He was looking at the fire. Boone. He confessed to all of it. I know. Nayeli said, I heard him. It is over. No, she said, her voice soft but firm. She looked at him. It is beginning. Ezra looked at her. He understood. The fight was over. The work was just starting. They will send Bly to Prescott. He said, Markham and Boone will go to the prison in Yuma. The town will have to learn a new way. And us, she asked. It was a simple question, but it held the weight of the entire territory. Ezra looked at his hands, then at her. I'm a carpenter. I need to build something that lasts. A cabinet, a house, something square. I am a grower, she said. My father taught me the plants. My mother taught me the songs. I need a place to put down roots, a place to make things live. They were not talking in grand, sweeping promises. They were talking about the work of building a life where one had been taken, the work of trusting, not just for survival, but for a future. The work of love. I can build a house, Ezra said. By the wash, out of the wind. I can plant a garden, she replied. Corn and beans. He looked at her, the firelight catching the high, proud line of her cheekbone. The day's dust was still on her skin, but her eyes were clear, bright as the creek water. He had shielded her body from bullets. She had bound his wound with her oath. They were tied, not by law or by ceremony, but by a shared, desperate fight for the truth. His hand, the calloused and scarred one, lifted. It moved slowly, hovering in the small, cold space between them. It was a silent question. May I? She did not flinch. She did not move away. She watched his eyes, and in them, she saw no demand, no ownership. She saw the man who had sat in the dust for 2 hours, giving her the respect of his distance. She saw the man who had handed her the proof. She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. She leaned into the touch. His fingers, rough as pine bark, gently brushed her temple. He swept back a single, stray strand of her dark hair, tucking it behind her ear. His hand lingered, his thumb resting for a second on the curve of her cheek. Her breath hitched, a tiny, sharp sound. He was so close. He smelled of wood smoke and dust, and the clean, metallic scent of the night. She lifted her own hand and placed it on his wrist, over the faded red bandage. Her skin was warm against his. They moved closer. It was not a sudden lunge, but a slow, mutual leaning, shoulder against shoulder, knee against knee. The world narrowed to the small, warm circle of the firelight. He wrapped his wool coat around them both, a shared shelter, pulling her in. He looked at her lips, then back to her eyes. Another question. She answered by closing her eyes. He leaned in. He placed his lips on hers. It was not a kiss of fire, or of sudden, desperate passion. It was a kiss of homecoming. It was slow and deep and certain. It was the press of his mouth, firm and warm, against hers, a sharing of breath, a promise sealed in the cold night air. It was a carpenter, setting the final, true piece of a joint. It was a quiet, profound act of building. When he pulled back, just barely, their foreheads rested together. They breathed the same air. His arms were around her, holding her close, her head fitting perfectly into the hollow of his shoulder. She could feel his heart, a steady, strong beat against her cheek. Naeli, he whispered, his voice rough. I am here, she whispered back. We are home, he said. It was not a statement about a place. It was a statement about them. We are home. She agreed. They sat like that for a long time. 2 survivors, wrapped in one coat, the fire burning low. Later, she took the faded red cloth from his arm. The wound beneath was a clean, healing line. She took the cloth, and from her bag, she took a new, clean leather thong. She sat, and in the low light, she began to braid. She wove the red cloth, the survivor's oath, into a tight, permanent circlet. She held it out. He gave her his left wrist. She tied it, the knot firm and small. It would not come off. It was the rope of a survivor, the band of a new life. He looked at the red braid on his wrist. Teach me something, he said. What a song. One of yours, one of your mother's. She was quiet for a moment. Then, in a low, soft voice, she began to sing. It was a simple tune, a dying lullaby, about the mountain and the corn and the long, peaceful sleep of a child. Ezra listened. He was a man of saws and hammers, not of music, but he listened, and he tried. His voice was a low, rough baritone, catching the tune. losing it, finding it again. He was awkward. He was broken, but he was trying. And for the first time since her father's death, Nayeli smiled, a real, unguarded smile that lit her eyes from within. "Your voice is crooked," she said, the smile in her words. "I am a carpenter," he said, smiling back. "I can learn to make it straight." "No," she said, her voice soft. "Let it be. The song is in you. The song stays above them." The sky, which had been a clear, cold black, came alive. A single bright line of light streaked over the Mogollon rim. Then another, and another, a shower of stars, a rain of silent fire, falling over the dark, sleeping land. They watched, their heads tilted back. It was a blessing, a sign of a world renewing itself. "Cinderwash," he said, his voice quiet. "South of the mesa. The soil is dark. It holds the water." She looked at him. "For corn, for trees," he said. He looked at her, his eyes serious. "Almond trees. They take a long time. They take years of work before they give fruit. They need water. They need protection." She understood. It was a proposal, a promise of hard work, of patience, of many years. A promise to build a life. Not in a single day, but season by season. "They are beautiful," she said. "The flowers. In the spring." "Yes," he said, his hand finding hers, his fingers lacing with hers. "They are." He held her hand, the red braid on his wrist warm against her skin. They watched the stars fall, and for the first of many nights, they were not two people surviving. They were one, planning. The law arrived, not with a bang, but with a piece of paper. A month after the fight at the chapel, a dispatch rider from Prescott, his horse lathered and breathing hard, delivered a packet to Sheriff Alma Ruiz. The territorial court, having reviewed the ledgers, the forged documents, and the sworn testimony of Sister Mary Collins, had acted. The federal judge's ruling was read aloud on the same steps where Bly had proclaimed his authority. It was a cleansing fire. All wardship contracts signed by Deacon Bly were declared null and void, the product of fraud and coercion. The 3 orphans were placed in the temporary care of Sister Mary and Mrs. Gable, their futures now their own. Sheriff Alma Ruiz received a formal commendation for upholding the civil rights of territorial citizens in a volatile situation. She read that part, her voice flat, and then folded the paper. Her only comment a quiet, "Well, the mail is on time." The scales, once so terribly weighted, began to balance. Horace Bly was taken to Prescott for federal trial, his stone chapel seized as evidence of his ill-gotten gains. Boone Lyle, his wrist in a permanent, crooked set, testified against his former boss, trading his confession for a lesser sentence of 10 years. Cade Markham, his vision permanently scarred, his arrogance broken by Ezra's mallet, did not get such mercy. He was tried, convicted of murder and kidnapping, and sent on the long, hot journey to the prison at Yuma, a place from which few men returned. The stone chapel, a monument to a man's greed, stood silent for a week. Then, by a vote of the town council, a council now led by Mrs. Gable, it was changed. Ezra Calloway, the carpenter, was hired to remove the altar. He took it apart, piece by piece, and used the good wood to build a long table and 6 benches. The garish stained glass windows were not broken, but they were no longer objects of worship. They were just windows. And on the first Monday of the new month, the stone chapel opened its doors as the Mesquite Crossing public schoolhouse. The town did not change overnight. The ruts of fear and prejudice ran deep, but the water was moving. Mrs. Gable, in the back of her dry goods store, began a sewing class. It was open to all, and soon 3 dine women, who had before only traded at the back door, were sitting at the table, sharing patterns and quiet conversation. On the porch of the new schoolhouse, the sound of children's voices, once hushed and fearful, now rang out, chanting the alphabet, the sound a clearer, more honest prayer than any Bly had ever offered. On the south slope of Cinderwash, where the soil was dark, Ezra and Nayeli built their home. He worked with the patient precision of his trade. It was not a large house, just 2 rooms, but the joints were true. The walls were square, and the foundation was set deep in the rock. He used the best aspen and pine, and he built a wide porch facing the east to catch the morning sun. Nayeli worked beside him, chinking the logs, her hands as sure as his. Inside, in the corner of the main room, near the window that caught the brightest light, sat a small cradle. Ezra had built it from a single piece of clean, white aspen, the rockers perfectly balanced. It was a promise, waiting to be filled. They were married on a clear day in early spring, when the high desert was just beginning to show a faint haze of green. There were 2 ceremonies, one for the law, one for the land. First, they stood on their new porch, and Sheriff Alma Ruiz, in her official capacity, read from a territorial book. She was not a preacher, and her voice was gruff, but it was legal. She acted as the witness, and they signed their names to the paper. A simple contract, clear and true. Then the second ceremony began. Sister Mary Collins stood with them. Nayeli's people, her cousins from the high mesa, had come. They did not speak of law, but of ho-ho of balance and beauty. Nayeli and Ezra exchanged the red braided bracelets, a new set, woven together. They were not rings, cold and metal. They were ties, warm and flexible, a sign of a shared path. An elder sprinkled a blessing of blue cornmeal on the threshold of the new house, a prayer for sustenance and peace. The next day, they walked to Juniper Mesa. The cemetery was quiet, the wind whispering through the cheat grass. They stopped at the grave of John Greyhawk. The wooden marker was now silvered by the sun. Ezra knelt. He took the $2 silver from his pocket. He looked at them for a long time. They were no longer heavy with guilt. They were just metal. He placed them on the marker. "One last time. It is not a payment," he said, his voice quiet. "For John and for himself. It is a fine for waiting, for staying silent for so long." Nayeli knelt beside him. She took the pearlescent shell amulet, her father's amulet, and placed it on top of the 2 coins, covering them, claiming them. The shell, born of water, covering the price, set in stone. She leaned her head against Ezra's shoulder. "Father," she whispered to the wind, "we choose the truth, and we choose the work. Every day." The wind moved through the yucca, and the dry pods rattled, a sound like a quiet, satisfied agreement. The town held a reading day at the schoolhouse. It was a celebration of the new books, of the new teacher, of the new life. The room was full of children, Anglo and Dine, sitting on the benches Ezra had built. At the front of the room, Nayeli stood. She was not telling a story from a book. She was telling a story from her heart. She told them the story her father had left her. "The stone is hard," she said, her voice clear, her eyes on the children. "The stone is large, and it does not move. The water is soft. It is small. It seems weak, but the water never stops. It moves, and it pushes, and it flows, and in the end, the water always wins. It does not break the stone with anger. It wears the stone down with patience, with work. Be the water." The high desert spring was cold, but it was full of a fierce, fragile promise. In the small orchard on Cinderwash, the first almond trees, thin and vulnerable, had burst into a cloud of pale pink and white blossoms. Rook, the black gelding, shook his mane, his tail flicking. Standing by the new fence line Ezra had set, on the porch, Ezra sat, his arm around Nayeli's shoulders. He was watching the sun come up, the first light painting the Mogollon rim a deep, impossible rose. He lifted his left hand, and the fire of the sunrise caught the red braid on his wrist. Nayeli leaned her head against his shoulder, her eyes on the blossoms. They were home. In this hard land, they did not buy love with silver, they built it. One hammer strike, one promise, one bloom at a time. Thank you for listening to this story. We would love to know where you are listening from, so please leave a comment below to connect with us and share your thoughts. Be sure to subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 like this video. And give us your support by hitting that hype button so this story can be heard by more people.